Welcome back at WNS. Not heard the news? Hear ye, hear ye. The Baltimore Orioles have further claimed themselves, I don't know about in it, but trying hard. Luke Jones is here to join us. And, Luke, if I could, if my Little League Hardy's hat still fit me here on the webcam. It's still got a lot of dust on it. I'm going to dust it off with my old Amici's rag here from our golf tournament back in 1997. Dude, I'm dusting off the old Oriole helmet here. We're ready to participate now, aren't we, Alex Cobb, huh?
Well, I'll say this, and my immediate reaction on Twitter at WNST was, look, Alex Cobb doesn't suddenly propel the Orioles into being the favorite in the AL East or even a serious contender to win the division in my mind. But if you're looking for a path to them contending for a wild card, being competitive, being in that mix as they've been every year since 2012, other than last year, even 2015, they were still kind of sort of in it going into the month of September, and then they fell off. Adding Alex Cobb certainly helps. And as I wrote on Monday at WNST.net, as I had just my 12 Orioles-related thoughts as we're counting down to opening day, as the snow falls here in the Baltimore area, I was shocked that Alex Cobb did not have a job, regardless of it being with the Orioles or not. And I completely thought at this point, if he were to sign with someone, it was going to be a Lance Lynn kind of contract, a one-year deal.
Sure.
Maybe a club option or a team option, mutual option kind of a deal, something where it's short-term. It allows the pitcher to compete in 2018 and to rebuild his value to take another shot at it next winter. But lo and behold, the Orioles give him a 4-year deal worth reportedly somewhere in the neighborhood of $56 to $60 million. Just incredible when you consider how depressed this market was, even for guys like Yu Darvish and Jake Arrieta, who still got good contracts, but not as lucrative as some people thought might be. For Cobb to get this,
people thought Cobb was going to get 90, right? I mean, 90 to 120 was sort of like 120 being crazy, but before any of this started, I'm talking about like in September and October when the market was being rumored out, right, against what other years and other pitchers had been, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone thought he would be a $100 million guy, but I think 4 years, 80 was probably something that he was hoping for. I'm guessing if he was telling you the truth. And keep in mind, there were reports out there that the Cubs had offered him, I think it was 4 years. I want to say it was maybe 50, or maybe 4 years, a little bit under, certainly under what the Orioles ended up giving him. And he turned it down at that point, and that was early on. And we saw how this market ended up just completely. The bottom fell out.
Yeah, call Mike Moustakas. Ask him how things are going, right?
Yeah. So it's really surprising. The skeptics will say the Orioles bid against themselves, and you know what? They probably did to some degree, but as you and I have talked about on a number of occasions, when you're talking about a market like this where guys are going to be taking shorter-term deals, one-year deals, that type of, where they're basically giving themselves a pillow contract, coming to Baltimore and pitching half your games at Camden Yards and pitching so many games against the American League East, which he clearly is very familiar doing and has had success, that's still not going to be the most appetizing environment for a pitcher to just say, yeah, I'll take a one-year deal with you. So,
well, that's the Lance Lynn story, right? Like,
sure.
when they're not willing to give a major league pitcher who has a track record, who, you believe you're going to get 28 to 32 starts. It's not Tillman or somebody who's been broken down or something, or not even a Dylan Bundy who's had that problem in the past. Cobb is a guy who missed some time, right, 2 years ago, and Mr. Angelos would look on the back of the bubblegum card there and say pending physical, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Sure.
But if you're not willing to give a one-year deal of $12 million, it pretty much said to guys like you and me who follow this thing professionally, they're done, right? I mean, if they're not willing to go all in 1 year at 15, give a little bit too much money, I'd rather have Lance Lynn at 15 than Tillman at 3 and somebody else at 12. You know what I mean? He's a major league pitcher. All of these guys, I mean, Lynn, Cobb, And certainly Cashner, who I think we were all a little shocked when that happened a couple of weeks ago. Not just the beard, but just the fact that, they're still sort of in the market. This is a very encouraging sign, and I'll get to John Angelos and Peter and who's running the place when kids are free now and like the dawning of the new era. I guess that's why I'm sort of dusting off. I think that dust on there is from the EBW or, maybe Eli Jacobs era after that. Well, that's white panel, dude. This is Hardy's. This is Al Bunbury, 85. This is EBW era. This is Lucchino era here, Earl Weaver era. Maybe Fred Lynn era. But either way, look, I'm all in that they're all in. These are nice signs that they're doing this. And we can get to why Alex Cobb took the money in the market. But this is one thing that the Orioles have done. They've taken advantage now of this soft market, right? Like, you always talk about market advantages, and that's what Moneyball is all about. That's what every statistic and every, war and every stat goes into how can we get an edge. Well, I guess you get an edge when the market's soft and you get an $80 million pitcher for $60 million if he pitches that way. And, time will tell. I mean, to not give Jonathan Scope any money, to not go and negotiate with Manny Machado, to not figure out Adam Jones, to not have Buck Showalter figured out, or Dan Duquette figured out, or Brady Anderson figured out, or Brad Bry. This seems a little out of character, a little weird, a little rotisserie baseball, which leads me to John, and you can have at it on that.
Well, getting back to Alex Cobb a little bit here, I'm not so sure the Orioles weren't willing to give Lance Lynn a one-year deal. My point of contention is I'm not sure Lance Lynn wants a one-year deal to come to Baltimore rather than pitching at Target Field in Minnesota, which is a little bit more pitcher-friendly. So as far as that whole aspect of it, I think this is much more a case of the Orioles probably have to overpay for starting pitching.
If you're going to make me come to Baltimore, you're going to have to marry me. I heard that once.
And you know what? I mean, at some point in time, and we've talked about this, and we've talked about a very similar narrative talking about the Ravens with wide receivers. It comes down to this. If you're not drafting and developing guys, and okay, they've developed a couple here, not that Gosman or Bundy have become Cy Young candidates or bona fide number one starters, but they've done that. But they need to do more of that. And, okay, they do have some pitching at the lower levels of the system that some people are optimistic about. Certainly Hunter Harvey. However this season goes for him, there's a lot of promise for him finally being healthy again. But it's very clear that if you're not going to develop stud starting pitching, then you got to go out and get some of it. And the problem has been for them that they're not willing to go out and pay the lucrative cream of the crop kind of contracts, and I'm not even saying that those are always great investments, but they've always kind of found themselves in this second and third tier. And the difference with Cobb, and look, I think when you look at where this market has been over the course of the winter, this is still very much an overpay in terms of years and financial commitment relative to some other guys. But the difference here compared to Ubaldo Jimenez or Yovani Gallardo, or even Andrew Cashner, who obviously a couple of those guys made much less money, had a much smaller commitment here, Ubaldo being the one that's kind of similar. I actually like Alex Cobb as a pitcher. I actually think this is a deal that could work out and work out pretty well. Now,
to me, it fills that hole that Tillman sort of left, right? I don't expect him to be Cy Young, but I expect him to be what Tillman was in 14-15, the way we thought of him as a number two on a really good day, but a guy that's going to take the ball every fifth day and give you a chance to win, right?
I think that's a pretty solid comparison. I mean, they're not the same style of pitcher. I think what's interesting about Alex Cobb, when you look at him as the pitcher, he's been a guy who's relied on a sinker, a split change-up, kind of like Kevin Gosman, only had much more success with it in his time with Tampa Bay prior to the Tommy John surgery in 2015. Coming back last year, he never really found the feel for that split. In fact, hardly threw it at all come August and September. He was much more of a sinker, curve, two-pitch pitcher, which is kind of an odd combination, but he got it to work. This is a guy who's induced ground balls at a very high rate. In fact, last year was his career low in ground ball rate, and it's still ranked 19th in the major league. So it just shows you this guy keeps the ball on the ground, which is a good thing. Pitching in the AL East, pitching at Camden Yards, we know that. But I think what's encouraging is had more success with his curveball last year than if you look at some of the sabermetrics, some of those measures, more success than he did prior to surgery with the curve. And if he can get the feel for that split back, which I don't think is unheard of to expect that, as he's another year removed from Tommy John surgery, then I think you're looking at a three-pitch pitcher who, again, has never profiled as an ace. I think you look at his best years in Tampa Bay, he's still a guy that, number two, good number three starter, somewhere in that neighborhood. But I think there's some upside there, whereas looking at guys like Gallardo and Wade Miley and even Andrew Kashner, who I'm still hopeful that can be solid, but in most of those instances, you were looking at guys who had very clear signs of regression or guys that things had to go really, really well for them just to be okay. And whereas I think Alex Cobb, I think he's going to be at least okay. I think that, at worst, barring he doesn't get hurt, which is a risk for any starting pitcher, I think he will be okay at the very least.
Well, on the backside of the Tommy John thing, that's always got to be a flag.
Sure.
Right?
But I think there's some growth there. Like I said, if he gets the feel for his split, which was such a big pitch for him before the surgery, if he gets the feel for that back, and while also maintaining some of the improved success that he had with his curve last year, I think you have the makings of a guy who, again, not a Cy Young winner or anything crazy like that, but a guy who is very clearly an above-average pitcher. So I like this. It's a risk. There's no question about that. Any deal that's beyond a 1-year or 2-year type deals carries risk, but we've talked about it. I mean, this team's payroll, even before this deal was, or even after this deal, still well below where it was a year ago. So you were in this in-between area where, all right, they aren't rebuilding to this point because they still have Manny Machado and Zach Britton's still on the team and Brad Brock's still on the roster and Adam Jones is still on the roster.
Well, you just went from trading Machado now in July to really saying, like, we're all in here because, I mean, you just spent $15 million on a pitcher, right? I mean, and just committed 60, whatever the number is, and I'm sure it's all deferred. And look, we'll find out whether Angelos is really around or not, Mr. A, as they like to say around there, because this thing will get whittled down to 3 and 31. You know what I mean? Well, by the end of the weekend.
Doctors get it. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all been said and done before pending physical, but, there is a part of this that it is kind of jaw-dropping all the way around in the sort of random nature of this, right? Like everything that they've talked about, everything they were strategizing before and talking about before, and Machado was on the market before, it's just like the wave comes in and it leaves behind a $60 million pitcher up on the shore, and it leaves behind kids are getting in for free. But what about Buck? What about Duquette? What about Manny? What about Scope? Like, it is very, very bizarre, man. That's all I'm going to say. It's very, very random.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear, and I don't disagree on that. I don't think this changes Manny Machado's situation whatsoever, but does it change the position of some of those other individuals? Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I mean, to try to gauge what exactly is going on in the warehouse, what exactly is going on in Sarasota, we don't know. I mean, let's be honest. We haven't always known, even when they've been really good over the last 5 or 6 years.
Good thing I'm rolling decaf tonight, brother. I mean, that's all I'm saying. I could be up all night talking about that one, right?
Sure. But that said, I mean, this is a move that I think can be very positive for them. And, as I noted, Alex Cobb's someone who can help beyond 2018. And look, believe it or not, despite all of the individuals who are in such purgatory right now, not knowing where they're going to be after next season, Orioles baseball is going to go on beyond 2018 in some shape or form. And you still need, even if you're not going to be very good over the next year or two, you still need some players. You're not going to be in a position where you have 25 minor leaguers on the roster.
Well, they just bought themselves an opening day starter the next couple of years.
Sure.
To my way of thinking, no matter what happens with Bundy and Gausman, who are both very much might-bees, Cobb's been doing this for 7 years. He's an is. I mean, They got a real pitcher, I mean, if I had gone away on a boat and come back on November, 29th and they had signed him not knowing the contract, I'd say, well, they're a better baseball team than I thought they were going to be. I mean, and that's on the wing and the prayer of Tillman and my man Nestor Cortez now. I mean, that certainly affects his future here as a Baltimore Oriole. I mean, that really does, right? I mean, as far as space on the rotation and space there for a Rule 5 guy. But, what's the political thing they say? I'm okay with this. Count me in on Alex Cobb and spending John Angelos' money for sure.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, certainly you can look at the deal and it's eyebrow raising. I mean, I think anyone who's even the biggest Orioles fanboy totally excited about this still looks at the deal and say, yeah, considering where this market was across the league, it's an overpay. But that said, is it an overpay on a guy that you really feel confident is going to be good, or is it an overpay on praying that Ubaldo Jimenez builds on his second half of 2013, which obviously never came to fruition? Is it hoping that Yovani Gallardo, despite all the optics suggesting that he was regressing big time, suddenly reverts to what he was 3 years prior to that? Andrew Kashner, we've talked about how his ERA looks good, but all the other peripheral stats say big-time regression. This is a guy that, there are some things that you have to look at, and like I said, if the split never comes back for him, then I do wonder how high his ceiling is then, or if he's more of a back half of the rotation guy under that circumstance. But if his split does come back, then he's certainly high-end. Comparison that you made, Chris Tillman 3 or 4 years ago, I think better than that even. So
he's your opening day starter next year.
Right. So I mean,
he might be your opening day starter next week. I don't think so.
Well, yeah,
he's got to get himself playing, right?
That's going to be another really interesting tentacle to this, at least in the short term. And who knows? Maybe it could impact how he pitches throughout the season. I mean, how good of shape is he in? Has he been in a throwing progression? Has he been throwing sim games? And I would assume he's done all that stuff. I mean, all different people who talk in Tampa Bay and different things written about him. This is considered a popular guy in the clubhouse, a gamer, a guy that's embraced pitching in some big games, as the Rays have, that he's done with the Rays in the past. So, this is considered a stand-up kind of a guy. So I'd be surprised if he hasn't been keeping himself in good shape. But how quickly can he acclimate? Is he someone who maybe has to miss his first turn in the rotation to start the year just because you have to get, he has to get a little more acclimated, get him on a schedule and everything. Is that a possibility? I know, Jake Arrieta joining the Phillies so late. There's talk about him. I think sounds like he'll be ready for the end of the opening turn in the rotation. But it's a different animal when you're talking about a pitcher joining you after March 20th, which is what this is going to be. So,
but it's not football.
Yeah. I mean,
he doesn't need to learn the plays, right? He just
sure. I mean, there's much more of assuming physically he's ready to go. There should be a much shorter acclimation to this, and with Caleb Joseph being the cerebral catcher that he is, I would imagine he'll get up to speed very quickly with Cobb and have this work out, assuming the physical goes well and all of that. But again, I think you look at this, and sure, you can always look at any deal as being risky, short of a one-year deal that's not worth any real money. But when you look at something like this, if the Orioles were truly going to not concede 2018, which, by the way, if they're 10 games out in late July, they can still sell off guys and still have Alex Cobb going into next year, and you try to build a roster for next season.
The Phillies did that with Arrieta, kind of, sort of, right?
Yeah, I mean,
and we really thought, in Texas they had done that when they made the Cole Hamels deal and they got into the race.
Sure.
I mean, you always look like you're playing down the line, but you're not playing down the line if Bundy and Gausman turn into Cy Young, right?
Right, and that's one thing that about this deal that I do like. Even if you want to point to the money and say it's a lot, it's a longer commitment, but life will go on. I love Manny Machado. Don't get me wrong. I think he's got a great chance to be a Hall of Fame player. But look at the St. Louis Cardinals. They let Albert Pujols go, and life went on for them. And this is the big if for the Orioles, if they're going to be willing to make bold moves and continue to improve their farm system, as it looks like it's slowly but surely starting to improve the last year or two. Still has a long way to go. And if you're willing to have a payroll that's going to be competitive, at least in the top 10, top 11 in baseball, where it's been the last year or two. If you do those things, you can go out and sign a Mike Moustakas next offseason, by the way, who is going to be a fraction of what Manny Machado makes. And that's just one thing you could do. That's just one idea. So, from that standpoint, again, Alex Cobb doesn't make the Orioles a World Series favorite or a serious World Series contender, but if you're looking for a path for them to have a 2016 kind of a season where they ended up securing one of the two wild cards, then this is a move that certainly helps, and that's also assuming other things go well for this team, which that's kind of that kind of gets lost in the wash sometimes. The Orioles, they've had success over the last 5 or 6 years, but keep in mind the years that they've had success, they've had things go really well for them. Good in one-run games, a bullpen that was really productive and at times overperformed. You have to have a couple guys come out of nowhere. I mean, those are the things that always have to happen. I mean, it's
kid that came out of nowhere last year. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, so they had one of those things, those sort of Chris Davis monumental things. They had that with Cruz. They had it with Trumbo. I mean, they've caught the lightning in a bottle with bats a lot, right?
Yeah, and a couple of those things are going to happen again this year. I mean, that's just the reality. I mean, they've never been the favorite. I mean, you and I have never been sitting here 10 days before opening day and saying,
are they going to win 102 or 98?
Right. I mean, we've been talking about, okay, I think the one year that you looked to it and said, okay, 2015 because they won 96 games, but keep in mind they had lost Nelson Cruz and Nick Markakis, so I mean, and Andrew Miller. So even that year, I think it was much more a case of, I think they can win because they were really, really good, but man, some things are going to have to go well because they lost some players. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not picking the Orioles. This isn't going to make me suddenly pick them to make the playoffs, but if you're going to ask me if their chances are better now to be interesting and relevant into the month of September than 3 days ago, I'm going to say, this definitely helps. So they need guys to play better than they did last year. And
we always say they need better baseball players. Well, better baseball players cost $15 million a year, and they just got one. So
they got one.
I'm good. I'm good with it. Bring him home. Let's get him into the rotation by April 20th. Right?
Yeah, and I'll say this. I mean, and making this move makes me like the Cashner signing more because now Andrew Cashner is your fourth starter rather than your third. And this move makes me like the Chris Tillman signing more because now you're not penciling him in to be your fourth starter. He's clearly going to be the favorite and be the fifth starter to start the season. But if he's disastrous and he has a 7 ERA in late April, then I think you're much more inclined to take a look at Nestor Cortez, who I assume is probably going to be a long man in the bullpen now, to take a look at someone else. I think it makes you a little less married to the idea of having to stick with him longer because it is only a 1 year, $3 million contract, and now he's your number 5 starter rather than your number 4. So I said about those two previous signings that in the proper context I could get behind them, and now with Cobb being added to the equation, I like those moves more than I did at the time that they were consummated.
All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Howard Bank, a relentless commitment to being the best at everything they do. Branches now throughout Baltimore and Maryland. The unique hands-on approach to banking. They are sponsoring our community and charity Be More Positive series that begins on April 5th. Also being sponsored by our friends at Cole Roofing. We've had this incredible weather pass through here. First the wind, now the storm. There might be some damage on your roof. You want to trust some good people. You want to trust the good people right here at Cole Roofing. Don't let it goof on your roof. You need them. ColeRoofing.com. Reach to me. I'll get you in touch with Billy Cole. He'll be talking some Oriole baseball with me as well. Also, all of our WNST programming brought to you by King Discount Liquors, Lottery, Beer, Booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. I hope you stocked up on that Malbec and whatever your hot toddy is here during the foul weather in the middle of the week. Get out to Rosedale at Pulaski High highway and give the king a ring. Costas in, good enough for the Today Show and good enough for my mom. The fat crabs, the cold beer, where I did my Dundalk High alumni thing. The legend continues. CostasIn.com. Lucas, let me move the conversation here to the why and the how. And let's peel back the onion of how Alex Cobb deals. Let's first say there are not usually players of his caliber on the market, on the cheap, at the end of free agency. So part of that is that I remember the Jimenez deal getting done at the end of a Super Bowl weekend and thinking that was late, right? January 28th was really late to be doing deals 5 years ago. Now we're into this weird collusive period. And, doing this deal, it involves money, check off from ownership, whatever ownership is. Obviously, 9 years old now and below all can get in for free. I've been hearing for 6 months that Mr. Ray's not doing well. Mr. Ray's having some issues. Mr. Ray's not really running things anymore. Certainly feels like Mr. Ray's not running things anymore, doesn't it?
It definitely feels different. And I don't even know how much this deal per se, because Peter Angelos was certainly in charge, so to speak, 4 years ago when they signed Ubaldo Jimenez to a 4-year, $50 million deal.
And Chris Davis. So
I don't know how much that, but, certainly you look at the deal with the kids getting in free. Certainly, John Angelos has been very outspoken about a variety of non-baseball issues via his Twitter account, and certainly you can speculate as far as him, at some point here in the not-too-distant future becoming the, quote, face of the ownership for this organization. And obviously Lou Angelos, who was at the winter meetings back in December, has some part in that. But it really is such a fascinating time for this organization. And I don't know if fascinating is the right word. Disconcerting, unsettling, whatever it might be. It really is because of all the issues that are still there, even with Alex Cobb apparently being ready to join the fray here.
Dude, minus the Russians, it's like the presidency. I wake up, what are they going to do today? Yeah. They're going to deal Machado, they're going to sign Machado, they're going to, what's up with Buck? Are they going to play? Who's going to pitch? It's a roller coaster ride with them. So for that, bring on the drama, and especially if the drama can lead to 88 or 90 wins, because that makes the popcorn even more buttery come the end of July when all of these people are lame duck and they're all going all in, kind of like the crew on Major League where they're going to make one more spin at it, you know? It really is sort of shaping up that way when you're dumping $15 million into a pitcher after St. Patrick's Day, right?
Yeah, there's certainly that, but here's the other scenario. Perhaps maybe this is the sign of a start of some direction. And look, I don't expect the Orioles to keep Manny Machado whatsoever, but perhaps it's the start of creating some more stability, whether that means extending Buck Showalter, whether that means you start engaging Adam Jones in a contract extension, whether that means maybe you work something out with Zach Britton on a 2-year deal for him to kind of rebuild his value coming off of an Achilles. I don't know. Just some signs that there's a vision in place. A big one for me would be, do you start to engage in contract talks with Jonathan Scope? And perhaps the fact that they've added another starting pitcher makes the Orioles a little more attractive to the idea of re-upping in Baltimore. Whether you're Scope, whether you're Adam Jones, whether you're some free agent next winter, who knows? But now with Cobb in place, you have Bundy, you have Gausman. You're hoping that there's another level that those two can reach this year sooner rather than later. You have the start of the makings of a pretty solid rotation there. Now, is it the best in baseball? Of course not. But there's some upside there. There's some future there. So I'm hoping that this isn't, if this is truly just a random deal and it doesn't signify anything else, it really will go down as just being bizarre and just really weird. But if it's the precursor to some other things happening that aren't necessarily going to dramatically change their fortunes here in 2018, but maybe it's a sign of some semblance of a direction, then great. I'm all for that. So certainly there's that feel of this being the one last run, and it is going to be their final run with this current core as it's constructed. But if you can re-up Buck Showalter and figure out what you're going to do at the GM spot, whether it's Brady Anderson or you get Dan Duquette to stay or whatever you do over the next several months, and you re-sign a couple more of your own, and you continue to get contributions from guys like Trey Mancini, and Hunter Harvey's ready to come up and pitch next year, and Anthony Santander, who's hit the cover off the ball this spring, becomes this year's Trey Mancini, and Austin Hayes is up at some point. Then you're starting to piece together what you can envision as being the next contending club. And I don't think that happens next year by any means. Believe me, I'm not trying to look at this with complete unrealistic orange-colored glasses. But if you start seeing some steps being taken to improve the future outlook of this ball club, then great. And then you'll look back at this Cobb deal and say, hey, maybe that was a sign of them acknowledging that, hey, you need to acquire some more pitching. And, yeah, we got some young guys that we like in the pipeline, but in the meantime, we think this guy can help us. And for them to make that kind of a move, even if they overpaid and even if it looks weird, then I'm all for that. And to me, that should be a positive for this club moving forward.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. Want to remind everyone we will be swabbing with head coach Barry Trotz of the Washington Capitals for the Bone Marrow Registry, and for There Goes My Hero. We're going to be doing that as part of our opening day after party at Michael's Cafe in Timonium next Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. So if you're leaving Oriole Park, you're heading back up toward Shrewsbury and Luke's country up there and Brooks Huff and everyone else up north of the border and up and along the York Road corridor, maybe on Valley, maybe Hereford, Joe Enoch. Stop by and get swabbed for the Bone Marrow Registry. Say hello to the coach, have a crab cake. We'll be serving those prime steaks up as well as the split-level soup. That's half cream of crab, half Maryland crab. I think Luke's going to like that as well. Ed Frankovic's going to be with me, grilling head coach Barry Trotz. It's all brought to you by our friends at Freedmont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. We always tell you, if you're in the market to buy, sell, just try to assess where you are in the marketplace. Freedmont Mortgage's website's fantastic. There's a little university up there. They'll be happy to answer any questions. A lot of those questions are answered at the website, and Carl does a great job with that, as well as the Harrisburg Heat, as well as sponsoring all of our swabbings, all of our live events, and we're getting back on the horse here, hoping to get Coach Billick out in the next couple of weeks on behalf of Living Classrooms as well. But this time, it's head coach Barry Trotz of the Washington Capitals. It's at Michael's Cafe on Thursday night, brought to you by Freedmont Mortgage, as well as by our friends at Cole Roofing. You can learn more about how to get the green space up on your roof, and Lord knows with all this weather stuff going on, roofs are of concern right now. The morning newspaper ships to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It is all brought to you by our friends at Planet Fitness, at planetfitness.com. It's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. They're guaranteed. And the Maryland Jockey Club, now our sponsor, on behalf of the Preakness and Pink and all the things they're doing this year, including some work for the Bone Marrow Registry and for There Goes My Hero. The entries now in the morning newspaper each and every morning at 7 a.m. as they deliver digitally to your email inbox, also on the front of our website. Luke, as we get ready for opening day here, tell me what you're anticipating, because I know you've been writing a lot about this as well. We're literally a week out, although it doesn't feel that way here. Any shockers, surprises to your way coming down the pipe that aren't named Alex Cobb at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd call them shockers. I think there's still some interesting battles to be determined here. I mean, the backup catcher spot, whether they go with Chance Sisco, whether they go with Andrew Suzak, they're still trying to figure out the bullpen, and certainly now with Cobb being inserted in that rotation, that's going to change what that bullpen looks like. Whereas before you were looking at Miguel Castro possibly as a starter, now it looks like he'll slide into the role he filled last year and did a really nice job. So that helps the bullpen in that regard. I think the biggest surprise probably, and again, acknowledging it's just spring training, but I mentioned him a few minutes ago, Anthony Santander's had a really good spring for them. It was a Rule 5 pick a year ago, had an elbow issue in the spring that the Orioles absolutely took full advantage of, keeping him on the DL. A basically until they got to August, and then
the world's one big scam, isn't it? I mean, they put these rules in, and and this is how steroids got started. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Well, he was hurt. He was hurt, but I don't buy that he was hurt.
Is this like the time that Ubaldo broke his pinky inky finger?
Right. Stepped in a hole in the parking lot or something. But Santander has swung the bat really well. The reports on him as a corner outfielder have been better, and it has shown growth there. But
by the way, I'm smiling on the video. I'm just thinking of Marty Cordova, and I don't want to get you off topic.
This could be Jake Fox. I mean, believe me, I'm fully acknowledging that. But if you're asking me my surprise,
well, I just can't stop smiling about it. That's all.
Oh, I know.
Because I'm trying to take it seriously.
We can play back.
I'm trying to get my press pass back now that John's running the place.
We can play back this tape in 2 years, and you can make fun of me if he's in Double-A for the Chicago Cubs at that point or something.
Or if he admits to the Sporting News in 2022 that it was all a big scam anyway.
Yeah. But Santander is someone who had the reputation for having a really good bat and had shoulder surgery, and that's why he was exposed to the Rule 5 draft. The Orioles took him last year, and he swung the bat well. And with Mark Trumbo being on the DL to start the year, he's probably going to get some opportunities, but most likely at DH. But, again, Buck has said some positive things about his defense. So we'll see. Again, not expecting him to hit 30 home runs or anything crazy like that, but he's at least someone interesting to watch that they're at least talking about him in a way that they're hopeful that he might be a contributor and not just a guy leaving them with a 24-man roster at the start of the year, because he has to be up for, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 43, 44 days, something along those lines, for him to basically fulfill his Rule 5 obligation, and then they can send him to the minors if they want. But, that's kind of the one surprise. Beyond that, I mean, the number 5 starter job competition has gone about how you expected it to go. No one has really seized that job. Chris Tillman was better his second time out, which was good to see, but still a long way to go there. So this team has a ton of questions. We know that. And even with Cobb signing, that doesn't change anything there other than makes their rotation look like it can be competitive if things go well, rather than looking like it's going to be a disaster again. So, we'll see. I think there are so many questions on this team, but I think there's still a lot of talent. There's still some things that can go well for them, and if they get the breaks, then I wouldn't be stunned to see them in the thick of this thing.
Dude, a month ago we sat here and said the thing that needed to go well for them was they needed more pitching. Well, enter Cashner, enter Alex Cobb. Okay, let's go play ball. They now have a chance to compete. Not to win 105 games if the Yankees are going to be that team, not to win 102 games if the Red Sox are going to be that team, and they're loaded up to be those teams, but to be a team that can be fighting to play 565 ball and, maybe have a chance to, be a wild card team. Okay, I'll hear that. I'll hear that. I think it's probably more like 520 ball, but time will tell. I still have questions about the lineup. All the same questions you have, but not to mention just the general dysfunction of everybody being in the last year of a deal, which, if the old man were speaking, he would say, I like them all to be a little nervous. They'll work a little harder this year playing for a contract. I can hear that, and maybe they all will.
It's interesting that you brought that point up, because that is, and look, we have no way of quantifying team chemistry and morale and just the overall vibe.
Make them dance on a hot tin roof, But
that said, you can't tell me that if you're on that club right now getting ready for a 162-game season, they see the same rotation that we've all seen this spring. They certainly suffered through games where they're down 5-0 in the second inning so many times in 2017. You can't tell me that the likes of Manny Machado and Adam Jones and young guys like Trey Mancini don't get a little jolt from the idea of Alex Cobb coming to join your ball club. So, how much is that worth? I'm not sure that's worth 10 extra wins or anything radical like that. But do I think that can help improve the mindset of your club going into the season? Yeah, sure. Why not? So we'll see. A lot has to go well. That hasn't changed, but having Alex Cobb in this rotation, assuming he stays healthy, the path for this team contending feels at least somewhat plausible now, rather than before that feeling like, man, I'd be hard-pressed to see this team even win 83 or 84 games, let alone being anywhere close to serious contention.
Well, they bought themselves a little bit of latitude here to compete, so I applaud them. I have my little this was the hat. I believe I got this at Royal Farms. Royal Farms used to do like a little drink, icy drink in the cups. Remember? Yeah, maybe that on Mesa Avenue. Anybody remember that? If you remember that from Mesa Avenue, throw me an email, nasty@WNST.net. I was telling Frank Schilling and Ed Stronsky about that I had all of my cups from Royal Farm. They did these, and I believe it was Geno's did the football helmets. So I have those from back in the 70s, too, with the Colts. So I got my little Orioles hat out here. It doesn't fit anymore, but maybe I'll have a scoop of ice cream out of it or something if they're in first place in August. I'm making that up, Luke. I mean, I'm trying to be optimistic because they did do a good thing, right? We can all agree, right? Like, there should be no blowback on this from anybody, right?
Exactly. Just be happy with this. There hasn't been a
whole lot. This is the Angelos estate spending the money you've given them that they've siphoned off your cable bill to make the baseball team better.
Be happy with this at least for a couple days. At least be happy about this leading into opening day, and then they play games, and then we'll see what the club looks like in early May and late May. You have my permission to be happy. Even if you're concerned about the money, by all means, be happy with this for at least a couple days because there hasn't been a whole lot to be excited about.
The best part about this is I can look completely foolish on the internet and you don't know it. Hey, man, rest up. We got ourselves a ball club here now. They're coming north next week. I hope you make it out afterwards to say hello to Coach Trotz, but I do understand in the aftermath of opening day, there are obligations. I just lost my helmet. All right, man, get out of here. He is Luke Jones, Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net. Give me an O. Something magic happens every time you go. There you go. Buy a Toyota Audio Vault is there 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Of course, we do have Coach Trotz out swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry. It is the opening day after party at Michael's Cafe in Timonium with head coach Barry Trotz previewing the Stanley Cup playoffs. Come on out. It's all brought to you by Fremont Mortgage and our friends at Cole Roofing. I am Nestor. I'm out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.